Hello ladies, gentlemen, and others. My name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 9 Episode 6, Confessions Within Cumulonimbus Clouds. And yes, I did have to research saying that name before the reaction. Gosh darn you, RWBY. But nevertheless, please make sure you have seen this episode first on Crunchyroll to support the show and said wonderful people in the RWBY, as well as avoid some massive spoilers ahead. And moving swiftly into the fandom spotlight, last week's dramatic chapter saw my review getting comments like Gerard007, who shared their fondness for Jaune's new rusted role given his past aspirations, though also reckons a somber end for the night might be on the horizon. Meanwhile, Paul Jordan highlights the hope we all have that RWBY will hopefully find a better way to live up to her mother's memory in due time. And finally, Sorta praised my silly little song in the last review, to which I say big thanks, and I hope you and your girlfriend are enjoying this volume. Cause I know for sure I am. It's crazy how strong this entire season has been, with the last chapter having some more awesome scenes filled with high drama, high tension, and high excitement. And now we're feet deep into the volume's second half with a familiar ally back in the fold, albeit one with quite the new look that left us hanging as to how last time out. And if the hype for the last episode was something big, it was gargantuan heading into this chapter, with many within the RWBY making it quite clear we were set for another entry in the series' long list of truly iconic episodes. But was this truly a chapter worth praising high into the sky, or was it cloudy with a chance of meh balls? Let's talk about it. Now, first, there's actually two elements before the episode itself that is worth noting. Firstly, we got a first warning for the volume, though it was just for flashing lights, mind you, but it didn't stop me from having a little bit of a panic attack, considering what happened the last time we had a episode warning. Secondly, for the first time, I think in perhaps this series' history, the opening visuals got changed, as Jaune, sans helmet, is now in place of his fully covered shot, now that we know that it's for sure him. A pretty cool touch. And it is the knight who we open this episode proper with, as after some echoed voices from the dramatic events of the central location in Volume 8, we see Jaune during his fall, only to then come across Crescent Rose. A surprise since the scythe fell way before Jaune did, and unlike him or RWBY and Neo in their descent, the weapon is covered in this red energy looking like a proper comet. But regardless, Jaune decides to chase after it, as we then see him arrive at the beach just like RWBY did. Only this time, when he strays deeper into the jungle, Jaune discovers an odd looking tree with a clock in its trunk, and small pocket watches growing from it like fruits. I guess this is a literal clockwork orange. Jaune in curiosity decides to pick one, which, in the long list of mistakes the poor guy has made in his life, this might be at the top of the lineup, as suddenly the pocket watch's hands spin backwards, and so too does time itself around Jaune. The days and nights reverse in time as he's whisked into the past despite his attempts to stop the watch. And we do see during this that the RWBY girls and maybe Gamble's Shroud did arrive in the Ever After in the same order they fell, judging by these comet streaks, which makes Neo, being the last to arrive, feel rather odd if the moment we saw her land in the Dark Acre was around the same time as Team RWBY leaving the Crimson Castle, as per the episode's directing when we saw it happen. It has to be for a reason, surely, since she also didn't arrive at the beach. So maybe we'll learn of that in the near future as we discover more about how and why Ever After has resonated with its new arrivals in such ways. Anyway, Jaune does manage to eventually smash the watch with crochet moors, though this too is a bit of a mistake, as there goes the only fruit that he could use to possibly change back time, the rest having already reversed back to not being grown anymore, leaving Jaune stuck in the past with no choice but to wait for the others for years and years and years. Kind of funny that after all our wild speculations of how Jaune ended up in Alex's timeline and looking as he is now, it ended up being because of one mistakenly picked fruit. Though I guess that does confirm that Jaune is not just the White Knight of this tale, he's also the White Rabbit, who's late for the big event. And I do really love the way the show does sell this harrowing, tragic circumstance that Jaune is stuck in, with his soulful shot of him sat alone on the beach, watching the sun set, before dropping his head into his hands, as the scene then hard cuts to the much older Jaune doing the same, but at night, and having made some small housing, showing that he has begrudgingly grown to accept his current fate. It's here as well that we see him reach out to two blue streaks, the same seen in the intro, which we learn who they are exactly in the future. But for now, this serves as Jaune's first explanation of his fate, as present-day Jaune really nails down how wounded his heart has been because of his fate, just by how he's struggling to trust if Team RWBY are indeed in front of him. The poor guy has waited for God knows how long that he can't even share full joy in the one thing that's kept him going all this time, though a welcome hug by everyone does help ease this worry and give him some long overdue comfort. The girls meanwhile also try to wrap their head around all of this themselves, though it seems that Weiss might have other things on her mind. She likes what she sees in the now matured Arc. No more tall, blonde and scraggly over there, just prime, rugged vomit man. White Knight a possibility perhaps? I certainly wouldn't be against it. I guess it all depends though really if Jaune can reverse this form, no matter how much that Weiss is drooling over it right now. And even if it was just a cute way to lift the mood a little, I did still enjoy it. Especially knowing the pair's rather bumpy past together, and wanting them to have a more positive relationship, be it as just friends, or maybe something more down the line. We eventually see the gang arrive in a new open field area of the Garden Acre. The girls have at that point processed the update on what happened at the central location that Jaune gave, and they're not taking it well. Namely the fact that Salem does indeed have two relics now, and Cinder is on hand to help her get the third, with not much comfort to be had as well in the relic of choice still being hidden, according to Osborn, since they're all still here, unable to stop Salem's lot from causing more harm. There's a lot of understandable bitterness and crushed spirits brewing up here, and now it's not just RWBY who's hurt, that for all their good intentions, they really did fail big time, no matter how small the victories like saving as many civilians as possible was, which I'm glad to see. If they all tried to move on from this loss with only RWBY being the one taking things the hardest, it'd be a bit of a sour vibe in me seeing the bulk of the heroes not really understand the weight of their actions and express on it, no matter how much the rest of them have grown since then. And I also like that Yang once again tries to comfort a shallow of hope RWBY to stop her beating up herself again like she did in the Volume 8 episode, Risk. I always love seeing these two share that sisterly love and support, and Yang does make a good point that RWBY is sounding a lot like Ironwood in feeling all the good they did and could have done was pointless if Salem is still capable of doing more harm. That fear shouldn't stop them from at least trying all the same, because that good is still important. And right now, it's hope that's keeping them moving forward so they can get back home. Though at the same time, I can get RWBY's side as well. It's just a bit hard to really take pride in any good right now, the more the bad just keeps piling up on our mind. And Jaune chimes in with some annoyance that the girls are wasting time stewing on their feelings, at least for right now, wanting to keep moving because of the nearby storm, which would make it harder to travel, with an early sample here showing that while this is indeed Jaune, he's definitely changed through his time here, lacking some of the softer edges to his heart after years of having to fend for himself, learning how to survive alone in this wild world and growing some coldness as a result, as well as a sign that his time apart from his friends has weakened his patience and understanding of others' issues, his consideration dulling with age, much like his armor. He does share a little smile though later on, in surprise that the girls managed to get through the Crimson Keep on their own, but that positivity vanishes just as quickly when the girls mention they got help from a certain cat, Curious, whose timely return from the market and joy at seeing Jaune is matched by said Jaune trying to attack them, despite them apparently being friendly allies as per the fable's retelling. And Jaune soon explains that his actions were born because, well, when he hears the girls have been led to the tree by the cat's aid, there's clearly more going on here that Curious isn't telling them. Like the fact that reaching the tree is reaching your death, for it turns out that it's the focal point of the ascension process, able to absorb you and your memories before changing you into something else, trading your past life for another. Quite the big detail to avoid highlighting by the cat once it learned that the girls wanted to go there, and this gives some clarity to a few elements, like Herb's descent into the ground. The tree itself was responsible via its long-spanning roots across the realms, whisking them away for their long overdue ascension. This also explains why the only way to get to the tree is for it to reach you. It does so when it's time for you to ascend. Unless of course you're Curious, you see, whose role is eventually revealed in this episode to be that of an aid to this process, guiding those in need of either motivation to fulfill their purpose or lead them on the path to their ascension. Though it tries to explain this lack of clarity in typical shady Cheshire Cat poor wavering, since they reckon the heroes will be fine. After all, they are Afterans who are grounded in this cycle of life and rebirth. It's their nature, a nature that RWBY and the others should be able to bypass as they return to the tree and get home. The tone for this scene is so damn engrossing. From the dramatic shift in the lighting as the storm sucks up much of the vibrant colors now that it's overhead, as well as the gripping music with trickles of synth sounds creeping in, capturing the nail-biting nerves in the air. Not to mention Miles absolutely killing it with his performance, where you can feel every ounce of animosity and frustration he has for the cat. Even the knight's new longer hair is adding to the scene, with the shadows over his eyes from his fringe adding further vitriol and menace to the lad's expressions. Fantastic stuff for a turn that, yes, I and many others did expect. I mean, it's a Cheshire Cat and it's voiced by Robbie Daymond after all. It's not that surprising that Curious was being a rather sketchy feline who wasn't 100% honest with its guidance. But at the same time, it's still a gripping scene, and the cat's continued playful response to the accusations really highlights just how effective they are in making them seem like a trustworthy element to some degree. Thing is, Jaune has a counterpoint to their claims that the girls will be fine heading to the tree by bringing up the fate of Alex's brother, Lewis. It has been a growing theory in the fandom that the other person seen in the mirror in the intro with Alex, and the other blue streak as well in that intro and just earlier in this episode, was a sibling. And now it's proven true. A major character that was even kept out of the fable shared in Remnant for reasons not all that clear, at least right now. Nevertheless, that's a massive detail to again be not brought up by Curious, and yet I'm not shocked that that's their only excuse of, well, you didn't ask, you just kept focusing on Alex all the time. Because that is typical of the Curious Cat nature, and it is still very entertaining to see them be so shifty. Oh, and Lewis, by the way, is a reference to the author of Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll, which I reckon has more links to this character than at face value, though we'll get to that much later on. For now though, tension is super high, and as much as Jaune wants to press on, the girls, especially RWBY, are still trying to process everything, to which Curious has a solution. One that causes Jaune to panic and try to stop before it's too late, as a bolt of lightning strikes and we are then taken someplace else. The purple clouded pathway realm teased in the intro and poster, known as a Ponderstorm. God, I love puns! Here I was thinking as well, this place was gonna be our endgame for the volume, some place inside the tree that will take them back home, but nope. It's already here, where we see the heroes be whisked away into a sort of magic pocket dimension of sorts within that storm, meant to help those who are caught in it to have a mental/emotional crossroads moment and reach a decision. And just as I love puns, I also continue to love just how creative and effective the Ever After itself has become as a character in this volume. It pretty much is at this point, with all the ways it's added to the narrative and its conflicts with these fascinating set pieces that is just as exciting to see how it affects the cast as it is just awesome to see on a visual level. Plus, anytime I see a piece of media use the Crossroads of Destiny trope to such a creative level, it always gets me giddy. Also, poor Weiss, she just can't help but end up becoming Ever After's punching bag, huh? And though it is a funny little gag with not much purpose to it, since we don't see anyone else get sucked up by a hole like this and fall back down Loki style, it still helps show more of the change in Jaune as well, because he just casually walks on by where maybe before in past Jaune he would have been there ready to catch Weiss or at least be her crash mat. But yes, now they're stuck in this literal mental maze, having to either wait it out until it passes or come to a decision on what course of actions to take. Trust and follow Jaune or stick with Curious. However, it seems two notable absentees have a different matter of sort, as Yang and Blake aren't with the main group. And we will get to all that juicy stuff in a bit, but since the brief cut to them is better discussed as the whole set piece, I'm going to stick with Jaune's lore for the time being as they trek along and pass these liquid mirrors along the paths that show some really interesting visuals for each of them. For Jaune and Weiss, they see Penny and the Falling Atlas respectively, two losses that are heavy with feelings of pain, sadness, regret, and shame. And I'm continued to be glad that Weiss isn't over her pains of losing her home just cause she had her moment in Herb Smoke where she cemented her resolve, and I'm sure her major arc moving forward will be to cement her own legacy by aiding in the kingdom's eventual rise from the ashes. As for Jaune, I'm wondering if he has told RWBY yet about him having to kill Penny during his earlier update discussion. You'd think that we wouldn't miss out on such a big moment, so I'd imagine he didn't. And remember when Weiss explained Penny's death back in episode 1? RWBY fainted mid-explanation, and even then, Weiss kinda danced around the finer details, so I think it's very likely that RWBY is still on the dark on this, which I feel is gonna lead to a major divide moment in the near future with the Little Red in an ever-increasing downward spiral of her arc. And it'd be damaging as well for Jaune, since it's quite clear even after all this time, he's still not over it. I mean, just look at Crochet Moores. The blade is still broken, and yet the dude got some new pieces for his armor, yet he's refused to fix up such a key part of his character. The scars are still there in his heart, and if even decades of time since this moment hasn't helped him come to terms with it in a healthy way, you have to wonder what indeed will help Jaune, let alone RWBY, move on from this rather than being shackled by it. Thing is, there's more on RWBY's mind than the Penny factor, as we briefly see in her reflection, a shot of summer. They're definitely being quite sly with RWBY's continued mentality of trying to avoid thinking about the pains such thoughts have on her, by having RWBY be the only one to miss their reflected vision. But the fact that it is summer keeps remaining this fault of the volume with her mother's impact on RWBY's psyche, especially after the tease that we got the last episode, that I still think is gonna lead to RWBY wanting to cast aside who she is now and all the misery tied to it, to take up a offer once again from the blacksmith and gain a new identity closer to her mother, at least until she overcomes this breaking point to reaffirm herself. But speaking about the vision itself, it's our first kind of good shot of what looks to be a new attire for Summer. She doesn't have the long black dress under a cloak that we saw in past visions, and instead she has clothes that actually look closer to RWBY's current attire, which does also now make me wonder if this actually is Summer, or indeed it is that fused ideal version of RWBY as her mother that we have talked about just now and in the last episode. Regardless, as the group walk on, the focus is then on Alex and her adventure. Just what exactly is the truth to it all? Well, Jaune, via some very lovely drawn 2D art, explains, at least in their mind, the true story of Alex, Lewis, and his role in their story. He waited for the others to arrive, but eventually came across the two siblings, joining up with them after they fell, as we saw those two blue streaks earlier, and they too wanted to return to Remnant just like him. Thus, Jaune would become the Rusted Knight that accompanied Alex as told in the fable. However, while Alex in the book was described as a typical petulant young brat who lied and cheated, the real deal was much worse. She was a callous and selfish girl who showed cruelty to the fantasy world that she found herself in, not caring about the misery that her actions caused, since, to her, this was just another world, not her own. She would simply just return home and avoid any of the ramifications, because all that mattered was herself. Meanwhile, Lewis was far kinder and smarter, albeit looking rather meek compared to his sterner sister. The visuals really painting that picture of a timid lad who couldn't stop Alex's cruelty, much less feel safe in this strange world. And I love the designs, by the way, and the artwork is really engrossing, much like the art you would typically find in a fantasy book. And soon though, things would take a turn for the worst, after the gang met Herb, who wasn't mentioned in the fable. While Alex did seem to enjoy her time with the herbalist at first, something that the Bugman revealed to Alex in a vision caused this already mean-spirited girl to become colder, especially to the rest of the party. She obviously saw something she didn't like, and this caused her to lose trust in the others, especially Jaune, who himself took this turn hard, thinking that his involvement in the story that he knew caused this change. The line, "I couldn't even be the make-believe hero," hitting especially hard considering we know just how much being a heroic protector means to Jaune, and how this has brought numerous pains in his life. With this defeated, self-blaming attitude not helped at all by the change in story, it seems, where he drinks the poison that is meant for Alex. Though on that note, it's actually forced upon him by Alex as well. What was meant to be a moment of heroic sacrifice for the night turned out to be a depressing betrayal, all born from one girl's selfishness, clouded by fear and resentment for someone who was supposed to be their friend and ally, but in her mind was actually someone who was only going to get in the way of her returning home. And given what we learn later on, I think I can understand why she felt Jaune could get in her way, but we'll cross that bridge in a moment. I'm really liking, by the way, how the story of Alex has slowly started to unravel with new sides and truths as the time goes on. The idea of a long-beloved fable being nothing but a lie has a lot of thematic meat to chew through, especially with how it can relate to our main story and how Alex's actions reflect on our heroes, as well as debates about what's true or not, and actions born from good and cruel intentions. And this also helps further enrich characters like Curious, who continues to be a fascinating conundrum, tempting viewers to really immerse themselves into the thoughts of the lead characters, as we try to also understand whether or not they can indeed be trusted. especially when Jaune goes on to mention that Curious left Jaune to guide the siblings to the tree. The Knight's distrust very understandable then on two fronts, if they not only were abandoned by their comrade, but also helped Alex return home, all because of their role, to help feed the tree through guiding others to ascension. It's all deeply enticing stuff, but it is here where we do need to switch over to what I'm sure you would all agree is something even more rewarding. Because it's time for your main event! Blake and Yang both got whisked separately to their own pocket of the Ponderstorm to help solve their more personal conundrum, causing the two to be left high above a mountainous space full of clouds on a bridge that gives me some very bad Crash Bandicoot 1 war flashbacks. And obviously, they need to reach the middle to find safety. But how can they pull this off? Well, things start promising after Blake shares that they want to be together with Yang on the platform, causing a new plank to appear. And soon Yang gets one too after praising Blake's smarts, or her brain as she puts it. Glad to see her awkward praising of Blake's new hair in Volume 7 wasn't the only sign that Yang is a big old disaster flirt, just like me. But yeah, I think it's safe to assume we all know where this is going to lead, as they have to talk about the other person, namely the things that they've wanted to say but haven't before, which does lead to a lot of cute interactions and comments, like Yang finding Blake's ears cute, and this typical charismatic way that Yang offers the floor for Blake's turn, which take things up to an immediate high notch in the best way possible, as Blake starts to lay it all bare with thoughts and feelings that ring so personal for both her and Yang. Blake starts by calling Yang an extraordinary person, and you can tell just by the shift in Yang's expression that that comment alone means a lot to her. But Blake keeps on going by praising how Yang is the first to live in a situation, that she admires her bravery even when she herself is scared, and perhaps most meaningful of all for Blake, that Yang does what she says. That's because when you look back on her relationship with Adam, it's well known that Blake struggled to trust in what Adam was saying as truth. All the niceties and honeyed false promises and signs of loving support for her weren't exactly truthful to her when Adam's actions spoke only violence, hate, and control. With Yang though, there's no mystery to her actions. She'll back up her words with comfort, guidance, joy, and love, with actions that actually means all of that and means the world to Blake, inspiring her just as much as it helps Blake feel safe and content around her. Then on Yang's side, she leads with a super personal line of her own, being glad that Blake has never been intimidated by her. We know by now that a lot of Yang's bolden toughness and temperament acts sort of like an emotional engine that Yang uses to spark her drive to protect those she cares about, but also guards her heart from anyone that she worries will only try to get to know her just to wind up hurting her down the line, obviously stemming from her pains regarding abandonment issues, which, yeah, Blake has never really felt scared around her. Heck, even after a bit of a rough first meeting, she was the one who found Yang at the beacon entry test, and when Yang rose her temper to Blake during their Volume 2 moment, Yang kept on going and Blake did not shy away. She remained steadfast, which I think means a lot to Yang, and she respected that. Like she says after this, she likes that Blake never gives up on what matters to her, be it fighting for equality, fighting for a happier life, or standing by those she cares about. And yes, people will hear this and go, well, she did give up. She ran from Yang at the end of Volume 3. Which, yes, but she did so because she cared so much about Yang and the others that she feared being around them was only going to lead to more instances of her dangerous past causing them pain. She didn't give up on caring about Yang and her friends. She did come back when their paths crossed for the first time, even taking initiative after this to try and make up for her absence, which again must have meant a lot for Yang when she's had to deal with so many instances of being left alone, even temporarily. And even if you strip away the climax of the scene, I love this dialogue. Finally getting to hear just how much the other girl means to Blake and Yang, and the escalation from cute praises to deeply rooted in the girl's past and nature compliments that ring the strongest above everything else. It's a discussion where, especially for someone like me, who has been here since day one, seeing these two grow as a pair, much less on their own, you can really feel their bond is deep, full of feelings that have been shaped by their past together. And it's not just sweet fluff that's actually meaningful as well. There is personal, treasured glimpses into something so loving within their hearts for the other. Earnest and powerful, and means so much before we even get to the bigger stuff. The music, by the way, as well, really helps sell the sweetness of this moment too, even before we actually hear the actual vocals. The song Worthy enriches the feelings with, say, serene echo of soft vocals that never overtake what's being discussed or expressed, simply complements it with an undercurrent of soothing vibes. The setting as well is also playing its part perfectly too, going from this overwhelming cloudy backdrop with strong winds that both start to ease up as the pair open their hearts, and as Yang suggests they speed things up by revealing anything big that they have yet to share with the other, Blake responds with a gentle smile and blush. Oh yeah, it's time for the Goliath in the room. The sun now breaks through the clouds to add in some gold and purples, enriching those actual trademark colors of these two girls. But when Yang buckles and shies away from what she is thinking of, the divide widens to where we see that the clouds have parted a lot, but they're still there. The issue has yet to be fully sorted out, and they need to express what they have to say to move forward, even though Yang is incredibly scared to do so, and we do understand why. Again, she's lived a lot of her life trying to protect her heart from more pains, especially with relationships, and she even vocalizes her fears in thought, describing it like a cliff jump. Once she commits, there's no going back. But good thing then that these two have such a deep bond at this point that the realm seems to reflect this by having Blake hear these thoughts and tell Yang they're already falling. She knows what Yang wants to say, and it's the same thing she wants to say too. But understanding Yang so well that she needs to say it first in order for her to grow, as well as wanting some faith that her feelings will be reciprocated, Blake nudges Yang just enough for her to say what we have all wanted to hear from the both of them. They love each other, with the cute detail as well that Blake didn't even hesitate to say "I love you" right after Yang did, being such a sweet way to have her immediately quell any fear that Yang's feelings weren't reciprocated in her, and also no doubt because Blake herself was just so happy she didn't have to wait anymore. And with this, the divide is gone. They're now standing together on the platform, and now it's blooming into a small garden full of white lilies, flowers which symbolize purity, a new chapter in weddings, or in this case, confessions, and in general, it embodies rebirth. And in Japanese, they are also the translation for the word yuri, which of course is the name for love between two women. We also get the true vocals for Worthy, complete with some retooled lyrics from the iconic Bumblebee song that was last tied to the pair's feelings, making this the perfect sequel to that song. Though of course, there's the most important detail of this entire scene. A kiss damn near 10 years in the making. And no lie, this was super emotional for me. And I'm someone who's only just got into the ship around burning the candle in Volume 2. A lot of that is because I know how much this means to other Bumblebee fans, and in terms of some welcomed LGBTQ+ representation in media. But this really is something special to me for many reasons. I've seen this relationship grow inside the show and out, and I'm just so happy the moment that many of us have been waiting for so long for got honestly the most perfectly executed confession and kiss scene I think the show could have done. every aspect of this scene was at peak performance. Like, this was the one moment every member of the team working on it wanted to work their butt off to nail at the absolute best that they can achieve, and this definitely is shown in the final product. The setting wonderfully echoed the steady flow of the pair's dialogue, which by itself was full of so much beautiful lines built on years worth of heartwarming, effectively supported groundwork. The music was the finest backtune to such a pure lovable moment we can get, and my god, Barbara and Aaron, I tip my hat off to you both for your performances in this scene if you are ever watching this. Both of you carried such a poignant and important scene with so much raw, honest emotion. It's obviously something that both ladies have been looking forward to for so long, and I'm simply in awe of how well they knocked this out of the park, truly embodying all the love that is shared in this moment. This truly is a flawless scene, one of RWBY's best crafted moments, and it's also brilliantly timed as well too, because now we get to see how their relationship can continue to grow, and how it handles through the upcoming rough tides still left in the volume. We don't have to have it at the end, where it would still be awesome, but its effect on the major narrative would be lost while we wait for the next volume. And I am always a fan of a love story that doesn't simply end at the confession and or the kiss. We've waited all this time for this moment, so now let's see what it will all mean moving forward for the major plot, each girl's respective journeys, and more. Simply put, I think I can already say this is not just my Scene of the Episode award winner, it might even be a high contender for when it comes to discussing my all-time favorite moments in RWBY, period. And we're not even done with this episode yet, because now we return to RWBY and the others, just in time for Curious to find them, with the girls not too happy that they left out what happened to Alex, Lewis and Jaune, as well as the cat's role in Ascension. Yet Curious keeps stressing they'll be fine, they're not Afterans, who are ingrained in the Ascension cycle, though the lack of proof to this is pretty damning. Not to mention, they backhand Jaune with a taunt of being crazy, like that's supposed to help disregard everything he said. And the cat admits that they've been helping the girls simply because of their desire for more fascination information. They don't even have proof of seeing Alex leave via the tree, as it turns out that they too were betrayed by her, left behind once the cat was able to lead her and Lewis to the tree, despite Alex promising that she would help take him to Remnant, which really doesn't help their case. At the same time though, I wonder if this is actually true, and this lack of proof is just going to be driving up tension for when the girls actually do try to escape the tree, and we are still unsure if it will work. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot on this whole Alex and Ascension thing that feels way deep in misdirection and misinformation, hiding the true events from all but Alex and Lewis themselves. What's more, Curious sees the comparison in how Alex tricked them to how the RWBY girls baited him with information, tempting him to guide them. They all pretty much did use Curious for just nothing more than their own personal gains, which, okay, that's actually kind of fair. And sure, Curious themselves admit that they too did use the others simply for information and entertainment, but that doesn't mean that it's still nice that the girls were using the cat in turn, no matter their good intentions of wanting to return home. It's just an big old mess of half-truths, deceit, and selfishness, which I think is not only meant to reflect on how similar these four are to Alex, but also to set them up in the future where they are no longer trying to forge bonds and work in partnerships with other people born on lies, like they also did with Ironwood. If they are meant to help bring humanity together to fight off Salem's darkness, they need to do so on unity that is forged by honesty, respect, and consideration for both parties' needs and feelings. It's why then I do doubt this is the last we'll see of Curious, as they leave rather sorrowfully, like they're likely gonna be still watching over the girls in continued curiosity, and maybe we will see both sides try to make up in the future and they have some better approach to things. But for now though, with the conundrum solved, the Ponderstorm breaks, returning everyone back to the Garden Acre. even if they're still too busy doing the two-tongue tango. At least this gives Miles, and I do stress Miles, not Jaune, to focalize all of our thoughts on this happy moment. So, after a mixed results time in the storm, we then end up in Jaune's village, which looks to be a paper town judging by the trees, or maybe because the Arc lad helped build this place, I guess it's an arts and crafts village. I hope those houses are fireproof. Anyway, a welcome moment of calm does bring us our first shot of the new couple being really cute all together, though an odd-looking RWBY has a rather interesting look on her face. I don't think this is RWBY hating on the pair, after all she loves her sister and her friend, but rather I think this could be RWBY having some concerns of her ability to help the two remain happy, as she continues to wrestle with her self-doubts as a hero and a leader. A concerning reaction all the same for what this does mean in RWBY's future if she tries something reckless to help Blake, Yang and Weiss, as well as Jaune of course, though that's nothing compared to her reaction to Jaune's surprise gift. But he was able to keep Crescent Rose safe all this time. And RWBY's response is not the overjoyed giddiness and relief that you would expect given how much she has treasured her weapon. No, instead, she stares down at the item hard as the rising screeches in the background and dark squiggles in the corners of the screen makes it rather clear that RWBY has some reservations about taking up her scythe, as she is still questioning whether or not she does want to keep living the identity she had before, of being the huntress, the young girl enamored by the heroic life, and someone who saw her scythe as an extension of herself because of the dreams and aspirations tied to it, which in recent years have led to death, misery, failures, and painful reflections that are now thrust in her head once more upon its return. Only she breaks out of this stare when Jaune calls out to her. This might mean that my theory from the last episode with the axe being a actual hidden Crescent Rose in disguise is, yeah, pretty much dead in the water. But this also does make me feel more confident now that the next time we do see RWBY take up the scythe, we'll either see her too afraid to really embody that identity once more while still racked by emotional turmoil, or she does try but is far from perfect, fighting like a rookie because her heart isn't in it anymore. And it will only be when she does eventually gain the groove and understanding that her arc is leading up to that we will see RWBY take up Crescent Rose once more as a physical sign that she is ready to become Ruby Rose the Huntress once more. But the episode doesn't end on this emotional struggle. Instead, after thanking Jaune, RWBY asks him what he thinks did happen to Alex and Lewis, with Jaune assuming that Alex traded her brother's life for her way out. A life must ascend for the process to happen and open the doorway to Remnant. And while Lewis's life was lost, Alex got her wish to return home, later writing her brother out of the tale when putting her adventure to paper, which I do not believe for a gosh darn second. I'm sorry, but look at this girl. Look at that egotistical brat. You think she would write a book like that, much less a time in a place that she hated? And she'd be fine writing in the rusted knight whom she betrayed, but she would keep out her brother, who as far as we know, we don't exactly know how she actually felt about good or bad? Nah, no chance. I think this is totally leading to a big reveal where not only do we learn the true author of the fable, we learn the truth behind the siblings' fate. So here's my guess on what exactly is true. I think while Alex did try to give up Lewis to get back home, the tree rejected this because of Alex's past actions. She caused so much trouble for the people of the Ever After, ruining lives all over the place for her own selfish enjoyment and later disdain for the world keeping her from her home, and the tree believes that she needs to learn her lesson and suffer the consequences. Why give her old life back in Remnant if she can't even value any life but her own, even willing to cast aside her own flesh and blood just for her own desires? So instead, Alex remained in this world, and we may have even already met her, cause I think she got ascended into the new role of being a Jabberwalker, fitting that the monstrous girl who caused destruction and misery in Ever After now has the physical form to go with it. But now she is warped into living this life and playing another role in the ascension cycle until the day that her heart, that still keeps Alex's memory alive, can somehow understand the value of a life. Maybe this would then explain why the Beast recently seemed to be on the hunt for something that can fix something else. Perhaps it's Alex trying to fix her current state so she can regain her form. This would then mean that Lewis got to leave, as well as the fact that it seems to be, in my mind at least, he's the one who wrote the fable The Girl Who Fell for the World, both as a meta reference given the Lewis Carroll aspect, and as a way for Lewis to use their experience to help inspire others to learn the lesson that Alex did not, to accept the consequences of your actions, to respect others, and to value all life, not just your own. The lad also changing the true events to a more reworked retelling, both as a way to help enrich the story's message through different scenarios, and to be still respectful to his lost sister, who they still loved, instead turning her into a somewhat hero who would grow from their experiences and come out a stronger person. Knowing firsthand this hope of theirs is the actual true fiction of this fable. In fact, I would agree as well with others who share in this theory that also think that Lewis was a former life of Ozpin. Think about it. They collected other fables in the past to use as learning experiences for humanity. He's also rewritten some to best support a particular message that he wanted to carry. He also famously said that he's lived through both his fair share of fairy tales and has made more mistakes than any man, woman, and child. Plus, for someone who spoke so fondly of this fable twice in recent volumes, the fact that he said that the girl left with no mention at all of Lewis is weird, considering, the general consensus is Ozpin does know the truth behind all the fables he has collected, because they are born from actual true events. So how could he not know about the key truths to this one? It also opens the doors for answering some other lingering mysteries. For one, where he kept the Relic of Choice. They felt confident that Salem would never find it, and, well, maybe that's because he hid it in a totally different world that Salem wouldn't know to look for without prior clues, which Ozpin likely made sure none could be found. So yeah, maybe then we'll end this volume with the girls finding the relic in the Ever After and bringing it back with them. What's more, I'm actually starting to think that perhaps Curious might be the relic being of the Crown of Choice. The color pattern certainly kind of fits the bill somewhat, but more importantly, we just saw that it is able to help call forth a way to help someone make a choice. The Ponderstorm, not to mention their role with the tree, is also in regards to a choice. Fulfill your role or gain a new one. And doubling back to the possible Ozpin and Lewis connection, this could also finally answer one of the biggest lingering queries related to Jaune. Namely, why did Ozpin allow him to stay at Beacon despite clearly not being ready for it, and his transcripts surely not able to fool a man as clever as him? Cause maybe Ozpin saw Jaune and realized that that was the Rusted Knight that he met as Lewis, and so to thank him for his aid in the past and to make up for not stopping Alex from betraying him, the now headmaster allowed Jaune to stay and become the hero that he would eventually become when he would eventually fall backwards in time and meet him as the Rusted Knight. Yeah, that's all kind of mind-boggling time confusion once more, but there's certainly some water to this. But then this brings us to the other big discussion point. If it is indeed true that the only way you can leave the Ever After is with something or someone being sacrificed to the tree, who's gonna have to play that role for the heroes to get back? Well, there's certainly a few options on the table, with the one perhaps most legs to it unfortunately being my boy Jaune. He might decide that due to his age and in wanting desperately to do one good thing left for those he cares about, he chooses to ascend as the Rusted Knight, giving the girls their ticket home in return, and finally putting his scarred soul at ease, even if it means his end. It'd certainly be a thematically sound and emotional moment that makes some sense for his character arc, but at the same time, I personally don't want that, as I like the character too much, and beyond that, I think his story still has pages left to go. I still stand by my recent comment describing Jaune as not the valiant lone hero, but rather the brave supported shield standing beside others. It feels wrong to picture him sacrificing himself again after learning volumes ago that such actions will only cause pain for those he cares about and leaves behind, if he gave his life up once more to save someone rather than fighting on side by side. And the poor guy also deserves a happy ending after constantly getting struck down by painful loss after painful failure. And sure, happily ever afters aren't guaranteed even in a place called Ever After, but it still feels right that Jaune does manage to persevere and not have his story end by living up to his family's legacy as a hero who has had to die on his sword just to be able to live up to that legacy. It also has some rather problematic ripple effects on the arcs of others if this did happen, like Ren and Nora. They are in the midst of their own personal journeys of self-identity and emotional maturity, which I feel would be rather overshadowed by Jaune's death, the pair spending more time grieving over this loss when they don't exactly have the time to balance that on top of their personal arcs. Same could be said for how this would affect RWBY after she gains the strength to fight on rather than lose hope. It would be hard for her to do so when she also has to cope with losing another one of her best friends. The only other roadblock as well to things is Jaune's age, and if he chooses to stay behind as well. And I do think him staying is actually more likely than him sacrificing himself, like he feels being the hero protecting this world is at least some way for him to have a bittersweet acceptance of how he can still have a meaningful life in spite of his age, if it can't be changed that is. But that in of itself might feel like a death because he's still lost to his friends, no matter how well the crewbie managed to spin it in a way like it's a happy thing because it's what Jaune wants. So for me, I think he will come back with the girls, and he'll have to cast off his age with his role as the Rusted Knight as part of the tree's acceptance that Jaune no longer needs this role, though maybe his memories of this time also gets wiped away like the typical ascension process does, but at least the others will be able to remember for him, and his heart still carries the memories as well in some way. RWBY is also another one of the remnant lot who might be able to try and sacrifice themselves to make up for her past failures and maybe even be that way to regain their resolve and become Ruby Rose once more. But it would also be something like, main character plot armor, kinda hard to defeat that. And obviously this story still needs her to learn the lesson, not run from it via a sacrifice. Neo is also a contender too, repeating the same mistake as Alex by trying to get back at the cost of more lives, and she caused more grief with her selfish needs. But I think there's actually a better, more fitting option on the table. Little, the one that I still reckon is the embodiment of RWBY's fractured hope upon arriving in Ever After, who notably is looking for a purpose, choosing to anchor for now on guiding RWBY and the others back home. I think it's very possible that Little will realize their purpose was to ultimately wait until the time comes where RWBY has regained the will to keep fighting during everyone's efforts to return home, and in that moment, Little steps up as an Afteran who can ascend and grant the others their way home, their purpose now fulfilled in what I'm sure would be a tragic but heartfelt moment that still allows the cast to feel the sadness of this loss without it having to come from someone like Jaune, whose absence would be felt longer for the rest of the series. But damn, this was a meaty chapter, and it's probably my longest review ever as well, for good reason too. It's wild to think that an episode with understandably one moment in particular that will be a lot of people's standout takeaway, it still has plenty of content beyond the scene that is ripe for drama, intrigue, prime theory material, and above all else, just a lot of in-the-moment quality content. Everything new that was explored with either Jaune the rugged, the stern knight, the wonderfully imaginative and effectively utilized Ponderstorm, and the newfound light shone on Alex that still leaves plenty to chew on, was so entertaining, We could honestly have done without the Bumblebee moment for this episode, at least maybe until next time, and still come out of this chapter with me saying this was a ton of fun top to bottom. But again, that Bumblebee moment, it's a wonderful scene, and it did help give this otherwise somewhat bleak chain of events come away with some brightness, so it's not a total wash of depression, concern, and so on. It is remarkably well directed too, with this being the first time that Yisa Badiola joined the director's chair alongside Kerry, both of them bringing their A-game much like the animators, voice actors, and beyond, with some of my favourite shots of the volume so far, having great use of camera angles, lighting, and even a dolly zoom for the scene's benefit. Top stuff all around. Let's dive into the episode awards section, which, the scene of the episode? I've already mentioned it. It's the entirety of the Blake and Yang bridge scene, for reasons that I already explained there, so go back to that if you want to hear me gush again. And in fact, both girls also win the character of the episode, for both being gems in a moment that matters so much to themselves and the other, much less us fans. And while I was also very tempted to give Barbara and Aaron the voice acting gold star for giving us a performance of a lifetime this episode, I do want to use this segment to give some praise to Miles for how well they gave us a new aura to Jaune's character through the way he effortlessly captured the now mature lads tortured with a tone through his voice, while still allowing moments of the old Jaune's boldness, sadness, and softness to creep through. And so, yeah, that's my thoughts on what's surely going to go down as perhaps a top 5 contender for iconic RWBY episodes, though certainly a chapter that is richly deserving of all that praise as well, beyond just the mother of all slow burns, finally reaching its highest peak. So many new layers to the cast, the wider story, and the deeper mysteries at play got dropped on our lap with some of the finest crafted material this series has seen. And it's generally become one of my all-time favourite chapters, both as a fan of the Bumblebee ship, a fan of Jaune, a fan of great dramatic narrative beats, a lover of awesome visuals and music, and of course, a fan of this series that's continued to excel this volume. And if the Crewbee's warnings are anything to go by, we're not out of the woods yet for more highs and lows on this monumental roller coaster ride. But what about you guys? Did you enjoy this episode as much as I did? How do you feel about Alex and Curious? How are you after that magical Bumblebee moment? And who do you think will ascend in the end? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and take the notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on all my social medias at TheKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.